The door slammed open so hard the bell above it nearly broke. Vincent Marchetti walked in with blood still pounding in his ears from a deal that had gone wrong minutes earlier. His jaw was tight, his hands were clenched, and every person in the small bakery went silent the moment they saw his face. He walked straight past the line of waiting customers and slapped his hand on the counter. "Coffee, now," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Behind the counter stood Elena Castellano, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting her apron. She looked at him, unbothered by his tone or his reputation. "There's a line," she said calmly. "You'll wait like everyone else." Vincent's eyes narrowed. Nobody spoke to him like that. Not his men, not his rivals, not anyone who valued their safety. He leaned closer, his voice low and cold. "Do you know who I am?" "I know you're rude," Elena replied without flinching. "That's all I need to know." A few customers shifted uncomfortably, but Elena didn't move an inch. When Vincent muttered something under his breath about her size, something cruel and thoughtless, the bakery went completely silent. Elena's expression didn't crack, but her eyes turned to steel. "Get out," she said simply. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Get out of my shop." Vincent stood frozen for a second, stunned. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, the bell above the door clattering behind him. Outside, his driver rushed toward him, sensing trouble, but Vincent waved him off, still staring at the little bakery like it had personally offended him. That night he couldn't stop thinking about her, not because he was angry anymore, but because no one had ever looked him in the eye like that. Every person in his world feared him. She hadn't even blinked. The next morning, against every instinct telling him not to, Vincent walked back into the bakery. Elena looked up from behind the counter, surprised but guarded. "You're back," she said flatly. "One muffin," he replied, "blueberry and coffee black." She studied him for a long moment, unsure if this was some kind of trick, but he simply took a seat by the window, quiet and still, none of yesterday's fire in his voice. Elena prepared his order without a word and set it down in front of him. "Thank you," he said, and something in his tone told her he rarely said those words to anyone. Elena said nothing back, but she watched him from the corner of her eye as he ate slowly, staring out at the street like a man carrying more weight than anyone could see. She didn't know his name yet, didn't know what he did or who he answered to. All she knew was that the same man who had insulted her the day before was now sitting quietly in her bakery, eating a single muffin like it was the only peaceful moment in his entire day. Neither of them said much else that morning, but when he left he glanced back once, just briefly, before disappearing down the street. Elena had no idea he would return tomorrow, and the day after that. The next morning, Vincent was already seated by the window when Elena unlocked the door. He hadn't said a word about how he got in early, and she decided not to ask. He ordered the same thing, one blueberry muffin and black coffee, and this time he stayed longer, watching the street outside like he was waiting for something or someone. Days passed and the pattern never changed. Every morning the same booth, the same order, the same quiet man who barely spoke more than a few words. His men waited outside in black cars, engines running, never entering the shop. Elena began to notice small details about him. He always sat facing the door. He tipped generously but never made a show of it. His eyes moved constantly, watching, calculating, as if danger could appear at any second. One morning curiosity got the better of her. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked, setting his coffee down. Vincent looked up, caught off guard by the question. "Because this is the only place where no one wants anything from me," he admitted quietly. Elena crossed her arms. "I threw you out of my shop." "Exactly," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "You didn't want anything from me either. Not respect, not fear, just honesty." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and walked away, though his words stayed with her longer than she wanted to admit. Over the following weeks, small conversations began to grow between them. Alina learned that Vincent carried more responsibility than most people could imagine, though he never explained exactly what that meant. Vincent learned that Alina had taken over the bakery after her grandmother passed away, fighting to keep the shop alive despite offers from developers who wanted to tear it down and build something bigger, something without heart. One afternoon, a black car pulled up outside, different from Vincent's usual vehicles. Two men stepped out, their faces hard, their eyes scanning the bakery like they were searching for something. Vincent stood immediately, his body tensing, placing himself near Alina without thinking. "Stay behind the counter," he said quietly. "What's happening?" Alina asked, her heart racing. "Nothing you need to worry about," he replied, though his tone told her otherwise. The two men exchanged a glance with Vincent through the window, then got back into their car and drove away. Vincent exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly. "Who were they?" Alina pressed. "People who don't like that I come here every day," he admitted. For the first time, Alina realized that his quiet mornings in her bakery might be putting her in danger, and instead of feeling afraid, she felt something else entirely, a pull toward the man who seemed to carry the weight of an entire world on his shoulders, yet softened the moment he stepped through her door. The bell above the door rang sharply one evening after closing, and Alina froze. She hadn't unlocked it. Someone had forced their way inside. A man she didn't recognize stood near the counter, his eyes cold, his presence entirely wrong for a small neighborhood bakery. "Where is he?" the man asked, his voice low and threatening. "Who?" Alina managed, gripping the edge of the counter. "Don't play games, Marchetti. He comes here every day. Everyone knows it now." Alina's pulse quickened, but she refused to let her fear show. Before she could answer, the door opened again, and Vincent stepped inside, his expression turning to stone the moment he saw the stranger standing near Alina. "Leave, now," Vincent said, his voice carrying an authority Alina had never heard from him before. The stranger smirked. "You've gotten soft, Marchetti, a bakery, really." "This is your only warning," Vincent replied, stepping closer, positioning himself between Alina and the man. The stranger studied him for a long moment, then finally backed toward the door. "Word travels fast. People are talking about your little muffin habit. Maybe it's time you remembered who you are." When the door finally closed, Alina let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "You need to explain what's going on," she said firmly. "Now." Vincent hesitated, then finally spoke. He told her about his position, the responsibilities he carried, the enemies who watched his every move, searching for weakness. He told her that coming here every day had become exactly that, a weakness his rivals could use against him. "So what happens now?" Alina asked quietly. "I should stay away," Vincent admitted, "for your safety." Alina felt something twist inside her chest, but she refused to let it show. "Then go," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. Vincent left without another word, and for the first time in weeks, the booth by the window remained empty the next morning. Alina told herself it was for the best, that she barely knew him, that his world was too dangerous, too foreign to her simple life. But as the days passed without him, the bakery felt quieter than it ever had before, and she found herself glancing at the door more often than she wanted to admit. Then one evening, as she was closing up, she heard footsteps rushing toward the shop. She turned just in time to see two men grabbing her, pulling her toward the alley behind the bakery. She screamed, struggling against their grip, when suddenly headlights flashed and a car screeched to a stop. Vincent moved faster than she had ever seen anyone move, pulling the men off her and shielding her with his own body. Within moments, his men arrived and the attackers were forced back, retreating into the darkness. Alina stood shaking, but safe, held steady by Vincent's firm grip on her shoulders. "I told myself I would stay away," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I couldn't." Alina studied his face. On the man who had walked into her bakery weeks ago, cold and closed off, and the man standing before her now, entirely undone at the thought of losing her. The days after the alley took time to heal, but neither of them mentioned staying apart again. Vincent handled his remaining enemies quietly and firmly, making sure the threat against Alina and her bakery disappeared for good. For the first time, he stopped hiding his visits, arriving openly, no longer worried about who saw him. One morning he sat across from her instead of by the window alone. "I want to tell you everything," he said. "No more secrets." Alina listened as he shared his real story, the weight he had carried since he was young, the fear of ever being truly known by anyone. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't want to be a secret," she said firmly. "If this is real, it has to be real everywhere, not just in this booth." "It is," Vincent said without hesitation. "It always was." Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about the powerful man who visited the bakery every single day, though few understood the real reason behind it. Alina's business flourished, protected quietly by Vincent's influence, though she never had to ask for that protection. She had earned his loyalty long before she ever knew his name. Months later, the bakery buzzed with its usual morning energy, customers chatting, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. Vincent walked in, same booth, same window seat, but this time he wasn't alone in spirit anymore. Alina joined him during her break, sitting across from him instead of standing behind the counter. "One muffin?" she asked, smiling. "Two," he replied, smiling back. "One for me, one for you." Alina laughed, the sound easy and warm, nothing like the tension of their first meeting. Vincent watched her, still amazed that the woman who once threw him out of her shop had become the only person in his life who saw him fully, without fear, without hesitation. Their story became a quiet legend among those who knew them, proof that even the coldest hearts could be changed by honesty and courage. Vincent still came to the bakery every single morning, not out of habit anymore, but out of love, choosing her again and again, one muffin at a time.